Hello everyone, I am Tacit, and today I'm going to be going over the Gems of War event objectives for the Weighing Options event, in which the Mouth of Zorn is added to the game. So this week brings in quite a few various skull options. We have the return of Earth's Fury. We have two really good Empower options within the drop table, as far as the event keys are concerned. And we're going to be getting a new Mythic this Friday, though that one is true damage related, not skull related. But anyways, let's start getting into this event. So first things first, Mouth of Zorn, good time to stock up on blue-yellow arcanes. Aside from that, unfortunately, pretty bad. Just deal some damage to an enemy boosted by orcs at a 4 times ratio, and if the enemy is death marked, there's a 35% chance he'll end up devouring them. Even if it did this every single time, it still wouldn't be a high enough devour rate. It would need like double this if they were death marked for it to really be that viable, and I don't really see a single circumstance where you'd bother using this. Even if you're early in the game and you're looking for other devour options, there's already other things like gluttony and such that are already good low rarity options, even lower rarity than this going into the future. So I don't really see a reason to use this, as there are already lower rarity options that kind of fill that gap a bit better than it. It is nice to see more early game devours, but this is not a usable one, unfortunately, especially with the devour requirement, which even without that, the death mark requirement, and even without that, I don't really see it being that usable. It does get to have, oh no, I thought it had Death Touch. It doesn't even have Death Touch! They didn't even give it Death Touch to go with it. Look at that. I guess it's mostly just given to undead stuff, but really? They gave it Death Mark immediately. I thought this was Death Touch earlier on. They have a similar icon. But nope, that is very useless. So yeah, it doesn't even have a way to Death Mark it on its own. So you need another way on your team just to Death Mark it to even get its Devour. So yeah, super absurdly not worth it, unfortunately. But that troop does bring Grosh-Nak to 25 stars. This is an extra 2,000 gold per day if you're super late in the game. As far as the event key drop table is concerned, if you are looking to get Grosh-Nak upgrades, it is a pretty skippable week. Grosh-Nak has notoriously been, maybe not the worst kingdom in the game. Probably more notorious for having the worst mythics in the game. Finally getting a pretty decent one not too long ago. Eye of Argus, wasn't this last month's? Technically this month's then. Mythic, so this one came in pretty recently. And yeah, it's somewhat okay. It actually does, Doom Skulls at the start of every single turn. Its ability, while not great, is not horrible. So it's actually usable compared to that of Gargantor and Shade of Zord. But overall, due to the drops here, it is a exceedingly skippable week on event keys. The only reason you would pretty much be opening event keys this week is for one of two reasons. One is you want to get the two good troops from this kingdom that are Fist of Zorn and Treknala. Not only are they used for a billion different events this week, and you'll probably get it just from buying up some of the tiers, however, they also have some of the better Empower abilities in the game, having a Skull Convert. There are currently 3 troops in the game that have a Convert something to Skulls, and these are the 2 viable ones, Fist of Zorn and Treknala. So you even get some team bonus whenever you use them together as well. So that's nice. This one converts yellow to Skulls and gives an attack to your first slot, and this one converts green to Skulls and gives Hunter's Mark to the first enemy, meaning you'll do 2 times more skull damage. They're both insanely good empowers that are very situational, but generally used together whenever you are going to bother using them. And they are used for a lot of skull spam teams, and they're used for pretty much every event this week, from the World event to the Thursday class event and everything in between. And they have a little bit of extra stats this week. But anyways, yeah, that's pretty much the only reason. You would do it for that, or you're trying to look for upgrades. I would not try to bother for any of these mythics, unless you just really want them because you need them for the upgrade for the kingdom. Because even if you want Eye of Argus, you're better off just Soulforging it into the future, rather than gambling on getting 2 horrible mythics instead. So yeah, there's not much here. You're mostly just looking for the empowers and then any other upgrades you might want just for the kingdom, and nothing more beyond that. As trying to get any of those troops, not really worth it at the higher rarity of the legends or mythics there. Anyways, moving on to the guild-related event this week, we do have a standard world event. Though one thing is not standard with it, we do have skull damage only for our buff, which is sometimes one of the more annoying ones. However, we do, as mentioned earlier, have access to the good old double empower, Fist of Zorn plus Treknala, and due to this, it shouldn't be that bad. We have access to Mang as well. We have access to Earth's Fury, which is situational, but I do advise getting it. I'll be going over more on that in a little bit. But basically, as far as scoring is concerned, just don't take Dynamic Goat. It's just Rarity Order. So as long as you're not taking Dynamic Goat, you should be good to go. And just take Rarity Order, starting from Mythic, working down the Legend, so on and so forth. And you'll earn max points that way. But very straightforward event. You just have to deal with only skull damage and not spell damage increase as far as the event is concerned. As far as a few other things that we have going on throughout this week, this Tuesday we're going to be having a faction event for the Deep Caverns, or Dripping Caverns, I mean. Dripping Caverns has a pretty good mythic, or legend I should say. for clearing out the room, so not too bad to do Purifaction for. Coloration is green-blue, so you have access to quite a few of the metas, like Iron Gut Zolgoth. You have access to Rowain for the earlier range. You have access to Tesla build if you want to go down that route. I didn't end up mentioning it. You can go double Tesla Holy Saint Astra. I don't have a team built for that for the team thingies, but of course Tesla did get buffed about a month ago, so you can end up running that for it. So plenty of options for running this faction down. Wednesday we're getting Orc Pet, nothing really special here. Orcs are almost never used. And even if you're doing the double empower thing, you only have 2 and you need at least 3 of that type on your team to get any bonus. So overall, pretty underwhelming pet that is almost never really utilized. The Grosh-Nak one's even used more than this, oddly enough. Because almost all orcs reside in Grosh-Nak, which is not ideal, because it's already a kind of underwhelming type for the most part, with a few exceptions. Thursday, we have a class event for Barbarian. Speaking of underpowered things, that just doesn't do enough to really be viable. It's just basically outclassed by other score-related hero classes, the many that exist within the game. And this Friday, what we were supposed to have last Friday, so of course I didn't actually mention this in the Monday video because we didn't know this until like Thursday of last week. We knew like the day before. But yeah, as you guys probably know by now, Vault events got switched, or I should say Bounty Hunter got canceled last week. They had some kind of issue with one of the files on mobile that has now been resolved, you know, with the new troop and everything. So basically they end up swapping what should have been the Vault event this weekend to last weekend, and now the Bounty Hunter got shifted from last week to now this week. So it's still the same thing, you know, standard Tragraki Ogress, or I should say Ogress Tragraki Corpse Mirror team, or anything similar that you want to run. Just put the Bounty Captain in the last slot, get your 30 times multiplier, clear through the battles. Pretty standard Bounty Hunter. Doesn't normally change. The meta needs quite a few more troops before it'll really shift into a different team. But yeah, very straightforward. But we finally have this now. But that does mean no Vault event this weekend, as we of course just had it last weekend. That just concluded as of several hours ago. Anyways, aside from that, we have the good old Soulforge. Oh, also that Friday we're going to be getting a new Mythic, by the way. It's a true damage Mythic. Unfortunately, I don't think it's going to get used much. It's not bad, but it's also not good. There are already things that are going to be better than it underneath the Mythic category, or even non-Mythic category, especially with Tesla getting buffed pretty recently. There's going to be Scourge of Honor. There's going to be Arachne Weaver. There's just better options than it. So I really don't see the new Mythic coming out this Friday being particularly viable, unfortunately. But it's still going to be half decent, so you can still end up picking it up for that if nothing else. And it's better to get a Mythic that you don't have, rather than getting a repeat of one you already have, so new Mythic's always valuable in that regard. Anyway, speaking of Mythics, there are 2 Mythics I would say are probably semi-worth crafting in Soulforge this week. They're probably pretty mid-priority. Neither of them are must-have for sure these days. However, they're still great utility troops. The first one, and probably the one you want to prioritize more than the other, is, at least in current state of the game, is probably Obsidious. While I feel like Wild Queen is overall stronger than Obsidious, Obsidious is very good in the situations that you actually need it. So Obsidious is ran a lot less these days because Elementalist exists, and Elementalist gets to stun, freeze, burn, I'm forgetting one, Entangle, every single time it does an extra turn, which is 4 effects. This just does all 4 of the stuns at once. So more often than not, it is just perfectly fine value. Just run the slow Elementalist, get the 1 disable at a time, have a better weapon, and, you know, have a better ability, and just run whatever on it, have the other benefits that hero has, rather than running Obsidious. However, there are some rare circumstances where you want to 4 times curse the enemy, 4 times stun them immediately, which you can do in 1 single extra turn, by the way. As long as your Obsidious is below your 4 times curse option, you will end up curse stunning them in 1 single extra turn, assuming your curse are curses, as that is a % chance. I think it's like, what, 40-50% off that one troop? Though there are other ways to 4 times curse as well. But basically, you just 4 times curse them, 4 times stun them, and then you have disabled every single trait. So this can end up working out pretty well. It's very situational that you would need to do something like that. But in those situations, it is the strongest option that you can utilize for doing that. But more often than not, Elementals is just good enough, so it has really kind of dampens the amount of times you'd bother using Obsidious. Not to mention, one big flaw of Obsidious, particularly with so many Elementalists running around in the current meta, is it does not have immune to stun, whereas Elementalist does have immune to stun. And this is very problematic because, you know, if it gets stunned immediately, well, then you don't get to stun the enemy. So this is very, very bad for Obsidious. Obsidious also tends to fall off whenever Obsidious starts to get really good, ironically, because in Obsidious versus Obsidious, the first Obsidious to Obsidious is the winner. And if you're the one who doesn't go first, then you kind of just get hard countered by the other Obsidious, which kind of makes Obsidious usage go down as it goes up, which is rather ironic. But it's still very good in very niche situations. And given that it's not ran as much these days, it technically makes it stronger, in a sense. Especially if the enemy team that you're up against does not have Titan, like if they're running like a stealthy hero class, is probably the best time these days to bring out Obsidious. as you not only get rid of the stealthy, but you also get rid of everything else that they have going on their team. So it's still really good in the current state of the game. It's just so absurdly situational when you'd bring it out. It's definitely not a troop you would keep on your team for every battle. You would only bring it out for those very niche instances where you end up needing it. And it's mostly a Guild War option. Under very few other circumstances are you ever going to need this outside of offensive Guild War on Brown, Red, and Purple Day. Speaking of which, this is also a Guild War option. Wild Queen, I guess, could technically be ran for Explore 12, but there's so many other skull-related options I wouldn't really bother. Even Wild King ends up doing it better, so Wild Queen's main role is just to be very safe. Well, maybe not very safe, but safer than Wild King. And it's mostly just used for Guild War days. Essentially, the way that she works is she steals a bunch of attack from an enemy and then gives it to your first slot. The way that you normally want to do this is you predict if you will kill or not kill the enemy with your skulls whenever you cast this ability. So if you think you will kill the first slot, then you go and steal attack from the second slot. And if you think you won't kill the first slot, then you steal the attack from their first slot. And you just keep doing that until their entire team is dead. This is pretty good when it works. The problem is when it misses, it kind of auto-loses because you're giving the enemy a billion green and skulls, especially if they're not frozen from elementals or anything else that you might have on your team that has freeze. So if that does end up happening, then you're going to take a lot of damage and give them like infinite green mana. But when it does end up working, it does a lot of value. And for that reason, still pretty worth using. You can easily get like 9,650 and around that range, like 9,600 plus in Guild War when it doesn't fail. The problem is those few circumstances where it does and falls apart, but it's personally not a risk I take in Guild War these days, but it definitely is one that you can. And most of the teams that you need to compose her do not need particularly high other rarity stuff. Like if you were running this on Purple Day, for example, all you need is like a Thrall, Leprechaun, and Hero just chilling in first slot, and boom, you have a team. So there are definitely days that you don't need that much to end up building her up, which is kind of nice, as it could be a good early to mid-game Guild War option for Wild Queen to end up having as your option. So yeah, definitely worth considering. And most of them are pretty much just Guild War this week as far as your options. Anyways, as far as Soulforge, there is one thing worth mentioning here. Well, obviously there's Doomed Codex, but one thing worth mentioning that isn't Doomed Codex, and that is Earth's Fury. You might notice I almost never mention any teams with Earth's Fury. This isn't because it's bad. It is mostly because I assume most people don't have this weapon. Rope Dart is a lot more notorious and stuff like that, for like you absolutely must get it before the end of the week whenever it is available. However, I don't think Earth's Fury has had that much of a reputation in that regard, despite it being among one of the best weapons in the game. One of the main things that overshadow it a lot of times is Mang exists, and everyone has access to Mang, so normally it's just easier of just saying, just go Mang, because, you know, everyone has it, super easy to end up obtaining, and yeah, it's just way easier to get. But this thing is situationally better than Mang. Its main gimmick is it still does what Mang does. It eliminates all armor from an enemy and does some damage to them. That's the exact same as Mang, except the way that it distributes attack is quite a bit different. Instead of concentrating all of it on your hero, it gives it to every single person on your team, but only does 1/3 of the value. So you're getting more overall attack. You're gaining basically 1 1/3, whereas compared to something like Mang, you're just getting the 1 times. So you're getting a whole third more attack than that of Mang there. However, the main upside of this is being able to feed attack to things that need it. So anything that has attack boost ratio, let's say for example, Opustet is one, where it boost ratio is based on all your attack, and you can end up getting a higher amount of damage for its boost ratio range. However, one other thing that this is particularly good with are things that have attack multipliers. So I'm talking things like 3 times damage, 5 times damage, things like raid battles, particularly invasion battles, and also Web Spinner, like the constant 3 times damage that it has against pretty much everything. So those kind of troops benefit a lot from this, particularly 5 times options, as you actually gain more overall damage than you ever would for a Mang on Hero, due to the fact that you're getting 1 1/3 extra damage overall, and you're also getting the 5 times multiplier. So with the 5 times multiplier alone applied to how much you're getting from this, you're already doing way more than what the value would be from Mang. So it's a very situational weapon, but in those situations, it is substantially better than Mang. It also allows you to put your hero in a slightly safer spot. You would normally put it in the second slot. More often than not, have your thing that has like 3 times, 5 times bonus, or whatever bonus it has in first slot, and then have the rest of your team going down that way. But yeah, anything that has a good attack boost ratio. One thing that this could also be used for, though, I wouldn't really advise it as much compared to some other options, like even Fist of Zorn just for the attack game, but Iron Gut. Iron Gut can benefit quite a few bit from this in early game, because you don't even need to get your Devour. You can simply just boost ratio from the enemy stats, get your attack to essentially 100, or literally to 100, and then your Iron Gut has 100% Devour rate. But normally it's better just to use like Fist of Zorn for the attack gain, or, you know, something a little bit quicker, or just go for your Devour with a mana loop. But overall, Earth's Fury, great option. I would not advise leaving this week without it. You probably won't use it that often, but when you do, it is very, very powerful. So definitely make sure to pick it up. And the very obvious one, get Doomed Book. This is used for Brown Guild War Day. If you feel like you're at that point in the game, just go get it. You'll probably know if you are or aren't. But yeah, insanely good for Guild War. You probably saw it last Guild War, assuming you're in a bigger guild, or even not. You've probably seen it at least once in the past. Absurdly good for Guild War days, as are all the books. So definitely make sure to get your hands on that if you're at the point where you need it. Anyways, let's go over a bunch of teams. So let's go over all the teams for everything throughout the entire week. Let's start all the way from the top. And we have ourselves the World Event team. This is the more expensive one. We are using Double Eye of Argris. I actually ended up picking up 3 of them earlier. But yeah, this is definitely not required. You can obviously go with no Eyes of Argris. If you only have one, you can also offset it with Hero, obviously. Go with Hero First Law, Eye of Argris, Fist of Zorn, Tricknala. But if you have it, that is extra Doom Skulls per turn. You end up creating 4 Doom Skulls at the start of every turn while having 2 different empowers to end up utilizing. And you just go all in on Skulls and hope you get lucky on the Doom Skulls. Next we have ourselves the cheaper variant, which is more realistic as to what you would run. It's just Mang in first slots. Warwolf for a bunch of red. This will feed mana to literally every other troop on your team, which is pretty nice. We have Fist of Zorn for the Empower Skulls. You end up just getting your Empower, sculling it up, and giving yourself some attack. And also just getting a bunch of skull pressure. And of course you do have 5 times, or not 5 times damage, but you have 160% damage per metal for the event. So you get a lot of extra skull damage this time around. You probably won't even need Mang for the earlier fights. You could even go a mana accumulating weapon if you truly wanted to. As the super early fights, you're just obliterating everything with skulls. And of course Tricknala for some Hunter's Mark in there. So if you weren't already doing enough damage, you'll be doing 2 times damage on top of all the other multipliers. And those do stack. The 2 times damage from this does stack with the 160%, the 320, whatever percent you have for your extra skull damage. These do stack completely. So if you have something like 320% extra damage, you're theoretically doing 640% extra damage due to the 2 times of Hunter's Mark. So yeah, we're going to have a lot of skull potential, that is for sure. So overall, it should be a pretty easy event week. Normally the skull event weeks are kind of annoying, but with this much skull damage amplification, it should be pretty straightforward the entire time. Anyways, next we have the Dripping Caverns. Dripping Caverns is the faction event for tomorrow, for Tuesday. It is a green-blue restriction faction. And for the lower range, we can just run Rowan build. Of course, this isn't green-blue, but you can run any hero weapon when it comes to factions. So you can just put Black Manacle there, or Scale Shield, whatever else you feel like running. Rowan, pretty standard for the armor boost ratio. Mirage Queen for the 50% mana start on it. And Leprechaun to do Leprechaun things and power into mass mana accumulation, as it always does. Plus, it gives you some free gold. For the later fights, we're just going with a Marilith Leprechaun base for our mana accumulation. And it's doing the pretty standard Hiking Iron Good Zolgoth to kill everything out. Works really good at the higher level range. And you just have an insta-kill into another insta-kill. As far as pure faction, you have a nice diverse team of just 4 Shoggoths. It's one of those factions where you basically spam the legend over and over and over again. It has a lot of true damage, even has, I believe, silence on it. Yeah, silence the first and last enemies, and even gets to mana accumulate some. So overall, really great option. As long as you have 3Ds going to the final fight, you should be fine. And of course, the banner is set all in on his colors, as is the only thing on your team. For the Barbarian class event, this is specifically a Orc Grosh-Nak restriction. So you have to use Orc specifically from Grosh-Nak, so anything in that category. Basically, we're just using the Fist of Zorn Tricknala base into a single Dark Song. You could triple up on the Dark Song for the extra purple mana if you really wanted to, or just doing a little bit with Archmages and setting our banner double brown so they can go for either brown or purple in order to feed up a nice quick Black Manacle. And if you get lucky, you'll even get a Devour, which will amplify your skulls even more. However, it's mostly just Black Manacle doing all the damage, and Fist of Zorn and Tricknala being used to clean up whatever remains. Next, we have the Grosh-Nak Trials. Grosh-Nak Trials, honestly, not that bad. We have access to Tricknala, Fist of Zorn, as is pretty much everything this week. We have access to that combo, so we're just going to be utilizing that combo. I actually use this in inverse order this time around. Generally, the order doesn't matter too much, as more often than not, you'll never get to the point where you'll die down to that point. However, in a battle like this, you might. So I actually set it in this order because she ends up denying the green and then the yellow. And the reason you don't want it this way is this will deny your yellow. And then if this is your only troop, it won't have any yellow to use, only the red that you've probably already taken all of. So this will make it so it denies something that isn't on your final troop, which is a little bit more relevant. Normally you see me cast it this way because normally you want to do Fist of Zorn more often due to the attack gain. But in this case, you actually want to have Fist of Zorn in your back, just because Fist of Zorn will deny the yellow on Tricknala. So in this situation, you actually do want it in this order. But Drake Rider up front because it has 2 lives. It's standard life and then 100% summon of Drake. The Brawl Master here is more so just for mana accumulation. He starts to lose value as more and more orcs die. So you kind of want him in the middle of your team. You basically want him either in your second slot or third, depending on how you want to run it. In this particular situation, we are putting it in our second slot here. Does have some scar reduction, does have some enrage. but you're mostly just doing it to hold the line in order to feed all your mana to your Trucknala and Fist of Zorn. And that's pretty much the game plan with that guy. And yeah, honestly, it should be a pretty easy event. This is a pretty decent team. Just name powers alone is probably enough to win. You have an okay mana accumulator, you have an okay tank that basically has 2 lives. So once again, a event that will not be annoying. So that's nice to see. And of course, Bounty Hunter, not much to really say with this. It's been the same for ages now. But Bounty Hunter team is just Ogress, Targaki Warrior, Corpse Mirror, and the new Bounty Captain in last slot. And this will give you your 30 times multiplier if you have all of them maxed. And then you just go through the entirety of the event with that. Pretty standard Bounty Hunter, hasn't really changed. It's actually the same team we mentioned last week, since of course we didn't actually have Bounty Hunter last week. But we do indeed this Friday. But anyways, guys, that'll wrap it up for now. If you still have any other questions, feel free to leave in the comment section below. Thank you all so much for watching, and I will catch all of you guys later. Goodbye, everyone.